The morning began with a strange stillness over the city. Birds that usually filled the air with their calls were silent. The wind felt heavy, as if it carried a weight that people could not see. Farmers in the fields stopped their work and stared upward. Children in the streets looked to the horizon without knowing why. Something was coming. At first, it was only a shadow. It moved across the land like a great cloud. People thought it might be a storm, but there was no thunder. Instead, the light of the sun began to fade behind a shape so large that it seemed impossible. A few moments later, the sound came. It was deep, steady, and unnatural. It was not the roar of an engine, but the hum of something alive with power. Then the ships appeared. They were silver and smooth, their surfaces shining like mirrors. They had no wings and no visible engines. They floated above the earth as if the rules of the world did not apply to them. The largest of them covered the sky over the capital. Smaller ships broke away from it, gliding in perfect lines toward towns and villages. Fear spread quickly among the people. Cars stopped in the middle of roads. Workers left their stations and ran to their homes. Radios crackled with confused voices from every corner of the country. Leaders tried to speak to the public, but their words were lost under the growing hum of the alien craft. The Surath had arrived. The Surath were not like anything humanity had imagined. Their language was sharp and clipped, full of sounds no human throat could make. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin that reflected the colors around them. They had no visible eyes, yet they seemed to look into the hearts of those they faced. They came not for trade or for peace. They came for control. For many years, the Surath had traveled from world to world, taking what they needed. They had harvested resources from planets both dead and alive. They had taken creatures from their homes and made them serve in distant colonies. In their records, humans were a young species with no way to resist. The Surath saw Earth as a perfect source of workers, strong, adaptable, and able to survive in many environments. They expected fear and quick surrender. The first ship landed in the great central square of the capital. Its hull opened with a slow, deliberate movement, revealing a wide ramp. From the shadows inside, a group of Surath stepped out. They moved with the calm confidence of conquerors. Their leader carried a staff of black metal that pulsed with a dim blue light. Without speaking a human word, the leader raised the staff high. A wave of sound rolled across the square, a command to kneel. But no one was there to hear it. The square was empty. Streets that led to it were silent. The windows of the surrounding buildings were dark. Not a single human stood to face the invaders. The Surath leader lowered the staff and exchanged quick signals with the others. This was not how their landings usually went. On other worlds, crowds gathered in fear or in curiosity. On other worlds, leaders stepped forward to plead for mercy. The Surath spread through the city. They entered homes and found meals still warm on the tables. In some places, fires still burned in stoves. Clothes hung half-folded in rooms. It was as if the people had stepped away only moments ago. Yet there was no trace of where they had gone. From the high tower in the center of the city, the Surath looked out and saw the same in every direction. Streets were empty, parks were quiet, and markets stood abandoned. They checked their instruments for signs of life. The devices showed faint readings scattered across the land, but nothing close enough to approach. It was as if the humans had melted into the earth. The Surath did not understand. They had studied human weapons and found them weak compared to their own. They had studied human governments and found them divided. They had studied human culture and found it full of conflict in their calculations. This was a species that would fall quickly, but the humans had done something the Surath had not predicted. They had disappeared. As night fell, the alien ships lit the sky with cold white beams. The light swept across streets, hills, and rivers, searching for movement. Every now and then, a shadow seemed to flicker at the edge of the light. But when the Surath followed, there was nothing there. They began to feel the first hints of unease. The humans were gone. But the world around them felt alive in a way the Surath could not name. The forest whispered in the wind. The rivers moved with a steady rhythm. Somewhere beyond the reach of their lights, eyes were watching. The Surath could not see them, but they could feel them. The leader of the Surath ordered the search to continue. Through the night, camps were set up in the city's largest open spaces. Guards patrolled the streets, machines scanned the air and ground for heat or sound. The Surath expected that sooner or later, humans would come out of hiding. Hunger, fear, or desperation would force them into the open. The Surath had seen it happen before. But Earth was not like other worlds they had conquered. The humans who lived here had survived storms, wars, and hunger for thousands of years. They knew how to wait. They knew how to vanish. And somewhere in the darkness, they were making plans. The Surath believed they had arrived to take what they wanted. They did not yet understand that they had stepped into a place where their greatest strength would mean little. They had entered a world where the most dangerous thing was not the weapons of its people, but their will. The night stretched on, and the Surath searched. The empty city stood around them like a silent warning. They did not yet know that the hunt had already begun and they were the ones being hunted. The Surath had conquered many worlds before. They were used to breaking the will of a population. Within days, on most planets, fear made people hide for a short time. But hunger and hopelessness always brought them out. Once the people were in the open, the Surath's control was complete. They thought Earth would be the same at dawn. The alien patrols moved through the city again. They searched every street, building, and tunnel. The air was still cold, and the white light of the ships gave the streets a pale, ghostly color. The Surath stepped through broken doors and entered homes that looked as if the people had left. Only moments ago, one house had a pot of water boiling on a small stove. Another had clothes hanging neatly on a rope, swaying slightly as if someone had just walked past them. In a schoolroom, books were open on desks, and chalk lay on the floor beside half-finished words on the board. Everywhere, the signs of human life were fresh, but the humans themselves were gone. The Surath commander in the capital sent out an urgent message. To the other landing teams across the planet, the reports came back quickly. Every location told the same story. Towns were silent. Villages were empty. Even the largest cities had no visible people. There were no great battles, no barricades, and no surrender. It was as if the entire population had chosen to disappear. The Surath were not used to mystery. Their strategies were based on speed and power. They controlled by showing strength and leaving no chance for resistance. Now, for the first time, they faced something they could not fully understand. In one part of the city, a group of Surath soldiers followed faint heat readings into a large underground parking area. Their scanners showed shapes moving ahead of them. They moved carefully, ready to capture whoever was hiding there. But when they reached the far end, the shapes vanished from their screens. The only thing they found was a small fire burning. In a metal drum, a simple note, drawn in black charcoal on the wall, showed a picture of an open eye. The Surath did not know what it meant, but the humans who had left it did. It was a message. We are watching you. By the second day, the Surath ships spread their search further. Smaller craft flew low over rivers, forests, and farmlands. They scanned for body heat and movement. They found traces, footprints on a muddy riverbank, ashes from a campfire, or a half-empty basket of berries, but never the people themselves. In a mountain village, the Surath saw smoke curling from chimneys and moved in quickly. But when they reached the houses, every door stood open. Inside, tables were set with bread and bowls, but the chairs were empty. The village dogs barked and ran away into the trees. Not a single human voice answered. The Surath began to grow restless. On other worlds, the fear of their presence made people act in predictable ways. Here, fear seemed to have taken another shape. The humans were not fighting openly, but they were not surrendering either. They were doing something the Surath had not faced before. They were making the invaders waste time. The commander ordered the use of sound pulses, a tool designed to disorient and flush out hiding targets. Deep vibrations rolled through the streets, shaking windows and doors. Birds burst into flight from rooftops and trees, but no humans ran into the open. The Surath scanned again and found nothing. At night, the city felt even stranger. The Surath kept bright lights on every corner, yet the shadows seemed to move in ways that were not natural. Sometimes, a guard would swear they saw a figure at the far end of the street, only to find nothing when they reached it. Supplies in storage areas began to vanish in small amounts water containers. Missing, food packets taken. No one could explain how it was happening. The guards were always in place, and the camps were surrounded by machines that detected movement. But the missing supplies proved that someone had been inside. The Surath began to post more guards, but the same thefts continued. The commander of the Surath began to suspect that the humans were not as scattered as they appeared. There were too many signs that pointed to planting fires left burning to mislead them. Marks on walls, and carefully placed items that distracted patrols. These were not random acts. They were moves in a quiet game, and the Surath were not the ones in control. In the forest beyond the city, a group of humans crouched under the cover of trees. They watched the alien patrols through small lenses made from simple glass. The leader of the group, an older man with a weathered face, gave quiet instructions to the others. Their goal was not to attack yet. Their goal was to watch, learn, and wait for the right moment. They knew that the Surath depended on their machines for every move. Without those machines, the aliens would be blind and slow. The humans had already found ways to confuse the scanners, covering themselves with mud to hide. Heat, moving only undercover, and using false signals to draw patrols in the wrong direction. Back in the city, the Surath grew more uneasy. The alien soldiers were trained for battle in the open, not for chasing ghosts through empty streets. Every day they spent searching without results was another day their resources ran low. They had expected to fill their ships with captives quickly. Instead, they were burning through food, power, and patience. The commander decided to change tactics. Instead of searching every building, they would block off the city and wait. If the humans wanted food or shelter, they would have to return. The Surath believed that time was their ally, but time on Earth worked differently. The humans knew how to survive on little. They knew the land and the weather. They knew where to find water and how to store food. And they had something the Surath did not: a deep, shared understanding that their survival depended on each other. As the second night closed in, the Surath ships hovered above the city with their light sweeping the streets. Far away, in the forests and hills, quiet human voices spoke around small, hidden fires. Plans were taking shape. They would not stay hidden forever. When they came back into the open, it would be on their own terms. The empty cities were not a sign of defeat. They were a warning. The Surath had stepped onto a world that would not break the way others had. The humans were still here, and they were waiting for the moment when the hunters would become the hunted. The third day of the Surath's presence on Earth began with thick clouds covering the sky. The sunlight that broke through was pale and cold. The alien ships hung above the city like silent mountains of metal. Below, the Surath patrols moved with the same steady steps they had taken since arrival. But something was different now. Their confidence had a small crack. They had searched for 2 days without capturing a single human. Their food supplies were being eaten away, and the small thefts from their storage continued. The commander told his soldiers to be sharper, faster, and more aggressive. He wanted to make an example. That morning, a group of Surath soldiers picked up a trail in the hills beyond the city. Their scanners showed fresh footprints, lighter than a soldier's but heavy enough to belong to an adult human. The prince led toward a thick forest, excited at the chance to capture someone at last. The Surath followed quickly. The trail wound between rocks and through patches of wet ground. Here and there, the soldiers found broken branches and small marks on the soil that confirmed they were getting close. Then they saw smoke rising through the trees. It was thin and white, curling upward into the sky. The Surath spread out, surrounding the spot from 3 sides. In the middle of a small clearing, they found a campfire burning. Beside it sat a rough wooden box, half filled with berries and roots. No one was in sight. The Surath scanned the area. The readings showed movement all around them, small and quick. They thought it was the humans trying to escape. The soldiers rushed forward, but the forest floor was full of traps. Thin lines of rope pulled from the ground and released branches that swung hard into the soldiers' bodies. Small pits covered in leaves caused others to stumble. Sharp sticks, hardened by fire, were set in the ground to force them to slow down. The Surath realized too late that the campfire was bait. The humans had led them here on purpose. As the soldiers tried to recover, the movement on the scanners vanished. The forest went still. The humans were gone again. The commander was furious when he received the report. He ordered that no patrol should follow a trail without full support from aerial craft. He believed that speed and numbers would prevent further traps. But the humans had already learned something important. The Surath could be tricked. That night, another team of Surath soldiers patrolled the southern edge of the city. The streets there were narrow, lined with old buildings close together. The patrol moved cautiously, their lights sweeping across walls and rooftops. Suddenly, they found a long cable stretched across the street. It was connected to several metal containers placed on a rooftop. Before the soldiers could cut it, the containers tipped over. Inside was thick, black powder that poured down into the air. The wind carried it straight into the faces of the Surath soldiers. Their breathing masks filtered most of it, but it clouded their vision and clogged their sensors. By the time they cleared the air, something else had happened. One of their storage units nearby was open, and more supplies were missing. The humans were not just hiding now. They were taking from the Surath and using it against them. The Surath soldiers were well trained in battle, but they were not used to being the ones who had to defend their own food and water. On most worlds, they took resources without challenge. Here, every resource seemed to shrink the moment they turned away. The commander ordered more guards at every supply point, but even then, items went missing. In the forest outside the city, the humans were working in small groups. They shared what they took from the Surath and passed information between groups. Using hidden signals, marks on rocks, strings tied in certain patterns, or small piles of stones told other groups where to go or where to avoid. The humans spoke in low voices, moved only at night, and always left false trails behind them. One of these groups, led by a quiet man named Rian, had been the first to set the traps in the forest. Rian understood the Surath's weakness. They depended too much on their machines. If those machines failed, the aliens became slower, more cautious, and easier to mislead. Rian and his group carried no advanced weapons, only simple tools. They had knives made from scrap metal, bows with handmade arrows, and ropes strong enough to pull down small structures. What they lacked in technology, they made up for in planning. Every trap was tested before it was used. Every path was chosen. With care. Back in the city, the Surath commander decided to send larger search teams into the countryside. He believed that a show of force would push the humans into making mistakes. He wanted to corner them quickly, but the humans had no intention of fighting directly. Instead, they watched from high ground and used signals to guide the movement of the Surath away from their hiding places. When the aliens moved in one direction, the humans slipped behind them to take food, water, or tools. Sometimes they left behind signs to confuse the Surath footprints leading into swamps, trails ending at steep cliffs, or sounds made from hidden devices that drew the aliens into empty valleys. The first real loss for the Surath came on the 5th night after their landing. A supply craft, kept on the edge of the city for quick transport, suddenly caught fire. The Surath rushed to put it out, but the flames had already spread. Inside the craft were energy cells, medical kits, and food meant for the search teams. The loss was heavy. No one saw the humans who had done it, but everyone in the Surath camp knew it was their work. The commander felt the weight of time pressing against him. Every day without progress made the mission weaker. His soldiers were skilled fighters, but they were tired from constant movement. They could not be everywhere at once, and now, instead of capturing humans, they were guarding their own supplies. Like prey. Far from the city lights, Rian's group gathered near a small river. The water was cold, but it was clean and safe to drink. They had taken enough supplies to last several days. Round the fire, they discussed the next steps. They did not speak of defeating the Surath in one great battle. They spoke of wearing them down, breaking their will the same way the Surath had done to other worlds. The humans knew something the Surath did not yet understand. This was not a fight for one day or 1 week. It was a test of who could last longer. And on that field, humans had thousands of years of experience. In the alien camp, the commander looked out at the dark hills beyond the city. Somewhere out there, the humans were moving, watching, and waiting. He had come to Earth to take slaves. Now he was beginning to wonder if his soldiers would leave with anything at all. The first mistake had been underestimating the humans. The second mistake was already forming, and it would cost the Scifi even more. The Scifi commander had seen many campaigns in his life. He had led armies against cities made of stone, worlds covered in ice, and colonies built in burning deserts. Victory had always been quick. But now, on Earth, every step felt heavy. The humans were not meeting him in battle. They were not running in fear either. They were doing something worse. They were making the Scifi feel powerless. By the 6th day, frustration had grown in every patrol. The soldiers complained quietly to each other. They were tired of searching empty streets and chasing trails that led nowhere. Their armor felt heavier. The air seemed colder. Their eyes moved quickly from shadow to shadow. The commander believed that waiting any longer would weaken his hold on the mission. He decided to use fear as a weapon, the same way the Scifi had done on other worlds. If the humans would not come to him, he would strike at what they cared about. He ordered his soldiers to destroy shelters, burn stored food, and take animals from farms. He thought that this would force the humans to reveal themselves. In his mind, people would rush out to protect what was theirs, and then they could be captured. The first target was a small farming village on the edge of the hills. The Scifi entered with large machines that crushed the wooden fences and pulled down storehouses. They set fire to the piles of grain. The flames rose into the cold morning air, and black smoke spread across the fields. The Scifi searched for the villagers. They found no one. The animals in the pens were gone, and the houses were empty. They burned them anyway. When they were done, they moved on to the next place. But something strange happened that night. The fires they had started were put out. The black smoke stopped rising. In the morning, when they returned to the village, they found a new wall built across the main road. It was made from heavy stones, strong enough to slow their machines. And on that wall, painted in bright red, was a single mark, an open eye, just like the one they had seen in the underground parking area days before. The commander did not like this. It was not the work of a scared people. It was the work of a people who were answering his attack with their own message. Over the next days, the Scifi tried the same tactic in other places. They destroyed food stores, burned houses, and took whatever animals they found. But each time they returned, later to find signs that the humans had been there after them. Sometimes it was a rebuilt fence. Sometimes it was a trap left in the road. Once, an entire patrol returned to camp covered in mud after falling into a hidden pit filled with water. It became clear that the humans were not trying to protect everything at once. Instead, they were letting the Scifi take or destroy what they could not defend. But in return, they struck back in ways that made the aliens work harder every day. One night, the Scifi supply camp near the capital was hit. There was no loud attack, no open fight. Instead, every water container in the camp was cut open at the bottom. By morning, the soldiers had nothing to drink. They had to send patrols to find more, slowing their search for humans. Another time, the energy cells for their scanners were found missing. The machines sat useless while the soldiers argued over how it could have happened. With guards standing only meters away, the commander grew more uneasy. He had expected humans to fight in anger or desperation. Instead, they fought with patience. They wasted no energy. Every action they took was meant to make the Scifi weaker without exposing themselves to danger. In the hills beyond the city, Rion and his group watched the results of their work. Round their fire, they shared news from other groups. Everyone was using the same tactics: avoid direct fighting, strike at supplies, and make the Scifi chase false trails. The plan was working. The Scifi were tired, slower, and less sure of themselves. Rion knew the time was coming when they could push harder, but he also knew they had to be careful. A mistake now could cost lives. The humans had one advantage. that they could not waste. The Seraphs still did not know how many of them were out there. Meanwhile, in the alien camp, the soldiers began to speak of Earth as if it were cursed. They said the forest whispered when they passed. They said the shadows in the streets seemed to move on their own. Some even claimed they could feel eyes on them every time they left camp. The commander tried to crush these feelings with strict orders, but even he could not deny that the humans were changing the ground beneath his feet. What had begun as a mission of power was turning into a slow, draining struggle. Then came the turning point. One evening, a Seraph patrol was sent to guard a warehouse on the edge of the city. It held food, water, and medical kits enough to keep the search teams going for many days. The patrol stayed alert, checking the building every hour. But during the night, the warehouse caught fire. The flames were strong and fast, eating through the walls before anyone could stop them. When the roof collapsed, the supplies inside were gone. No human was seen. There were no tracks in the dirt outside. The fire had started and ended like a storm. The loss was heavy. It meant the Seraph would have to bring more supplies from their ships in orbit, which would take time and leave them with less power for their weapons. For the first time, the commander began to wonder if staying on Earth was worth the cost. They had taken no captives. They had lost supplies and time. And now, every patrol moved with a kind of nervous care that slowed the entire mission. Far in the hills, Rian and his group watched the orange glow of the warehouse fire in the distance. No one spoke for a long time. Then Rian said quietly that the Seraph were beginning to feel what they had made others feel on many worlds. They were starting to understand what it meant to be hunted. If you want, I can make part 5 even more intense, where the humans take bolder actions entering alien camps at night, breaking their machines, and making the Seraph feel unsafe even in their strongest positions. That will make the shift in power very clear. Do you want me to go ahead with part 5? You said part 5 1100 words kaleko, or interesting hunachea, or third-person style malek niha, or simple basic English ka. Don't use any violated word, so please avoid any violated content. Don't use Dashik said, alright, there's part 5 in about 1100 words in third person, using simple clear English and keeping the HFY tension high, without any inappropriate content or ellipses. Part 5. The human counter-stricken Seraph commander had hoped that the destruction of the humans' villages and food stores would force them into the open. Instead, the opposite happened. The humans became bolder. The more the Seraph tried to break them, the stronger and more fearless they seemed to grow. By the 8th day, something had changed in the air. It was not just that the Seraph were tired. It was that they no longer felt safe, even in their own camps. The humans had begun to move into the very heart of Seraph positions. It started with small things. A weapon rack found empty in the morning. A radio unit taken apart piece by piece. A bundle of ropes left tied across the camp entrance so that soldiers stumbled in the dark. The Seraph did not hear the humans coming or see them leave. Yet every day there was a new sign that they had been there. The commander increased the number of guards around the camps. Floodlights swept across the ground all night. Sensors were placed on every path. But the humans seemed to pass through these defenses as if they were not there. They knew when to move, where the guards' eyes were pointed, and how to make the machines fail without leaving a trace. In the forest beyond the capital, Rian's group studied a map drawn on rough cloth. It showed the locations of Seraph camps, supply depots, and landing pads. The map was not made from anything the Seraph had left behind. It was made from careful observation. Rian and his scouts had spent days watching the aliens, noting every change in their patrols, every shift in their routines. They were ready to push harder. That night, Rian led his group to the edge of a large Seraph camp. The camp was surrounded by high walls of metal, with watchtowers at each corner. Inside, lights shone on rows of machines and stacked crates. The humans waited in the shadows until a patrol passed by, then moved silently along the wall. From his pack, Rian took out a small device the humans had built from stolen Seraph parts. It was no weapon. It was a tool meant to overload the sensors the Seraph relied on. He pressed it against the wall, and a faint hum passed through the metal. Inside, the lights flickered once. That was all the opening they needed. 2 members of the group slipped through a gap in the wall, moving between shadows until they reached the supply area. They worked quickly, breaking open crates and taking small, valuable items, medical kits, rations, and energy cells. Before the Serath realized what was happening, the humans were gone. By the time the alarm sounded, the forest had already swallowed them. The next morning, the commander stood in the supply area, looking at the damage. It was not the loss of the supplies that bothered him most, it was that the humans had been inside his camp without being seen. That kind of boldness meant they were no longer just surviving. They were winning. And it did not stop there. On the 10th day, a patrol returning to camp found their path blocked by fallen trees. While they cleared the way, another group of humans slipped into an unguarded storage tent and set fire to its contents. The smoke rose into the sky before anyone could stop it. Another time, the Serath communications tower in the city stopped working. When soldiers went to check it, they found the wires neatly cut and the controls jammed with pieces of stone. On the wall of the tower, painted in red, was the open eye. The Serath soldiers began to look over their shoulders more often. They no longer trusted their patrol routes, their scanners, or even the safety of their camps. Every noise in the night made them tense. Every shadow looked like it could hide a human. In the hills, Rion's group listened to reports from other bands of humans. Everyone was doing the same thing, breaking the Serath's machines, taking their supplies, and leaving signs that they were always watching. The humans were no longer just avoiding capture. They were controlling the fight. Rion knew this was more than just a way to weaken the aliens. It was a way to send a message. Earth was not theirs to take. In one of the boldest moves yet, a group of humans entered the largest Serath camp in the middle of the night. They did not attack anyone. Instead, they rearranged equipment, tied knots and cables, and left strange marks on walls and doors. When the Serath woke, it took hours to undo the confusion. It was as if the humans were showing that they could walk anywhere they wanted. The commander tried to respond with stronger measures. He ordered constant patrols and built heavier defenses. He told his soldiers to be ready for a direct attack, but the attack never came. The humans kept fighting on their own terms. One evening, the Serath lost another landing pad. It was not destroyed with fire or explosives. Instead, the control systems had been damaged so completely that it could not be repaired. Without parts from their ships in orbit, the commander stared at the useless pad and felt something he had not felt since arriving. Doubt. The humans had been underestimated from the first day. They had no advanced weapons, no great armies, and no single leader. Yet they were breaking the Serath piece by piece. In the quiet of the forest, Rion and his group shared a simple meal of bread and berries. They did not cheer or speak loudly about their victories. They knew the fight was far from over, but they also knew something had changed. The Serath had come to Earth thinking they were the hunters. Now, every day, they looked more like the hunted. The Serath commander stood on the high platform in the middle of the camp. Looking over his soldiers, they moved slower now. Their steps no longer had the sharp, steady rhythm of the first day. Armor hung heavier on their shoulders. Their eyes moved quickly, searching the shadows for enemies they could not see. It had been almost 2 weeks since they landed. In that time, they had captured no humans, destroyed only empty buildings, and lost more supplies than they had taken. The commander had expected this world to fall into his control in days. Now he felt the weight of every hour that passed. The humans had turned the fight into something the Serath were not prepared for. There were no open battles where the Serath's weapons could dominate. There were no lines to break or walls to breach. Instead, there were traps, false trails, and quiet attacks in the night. The humans chose when to appear and when to vanish. They struck quickly, then melted back into the land. That morning, another report arrived from the Northern Patrol. 3 soldiers had vanished during a search in the hills. There had been no sound of a fight. They had simply stopped answering their radios, and their signals had gone dark. The rest of the patrol returned without them. The commander ordered the area searched, but all they found were small prints in the dirt and a mark carved into a tree. Open-eyed, staring back at them, the commander called his officers together round the table. They discussed every option. They could bring down more ships and flood the land with soldiers. They could burn more villages and destroy every shelter they found, but none of them could promise it would work. The humans seemed able to survive anywhere. Even if the Surath burned the fields and drained the rivers, they would find a way to endure. The officers began to speak in low voices about another problem: morale. Soldiers were growing restless. They spoke of the humans as if they were part of the earth itself, moving through trees and rivers without being seen. Some claimed to hear voices in the night. Others said they saw movement in the corner of their vision, only to find nothing there. In the forest beyond the capital, Rion's group listened to the Surath's movements from a safe distance. They had ways of knowing what the aliens were planning. Small mirrors placed on hills caught the shine of alien patrol lights. Simple glass tubes buried in the ground carried sound from far away. The humans could tell when the Surath were shifting patrols or moving supplies. Rion had noticed something in the last few days. The aliens were no longer moving with certainty. They stayed close to their camps, rarely going deep into the forests. When they did, they traveled in larger groups, as if afraid of being cut off. The humans had seen this before in other fights, though never against beings from another world. It was the same pattern that happened when an enemy realized they were losing. The Surath were beginning to defend themselves instead of pressing forward. One night, a Surath guard in the main camp saw something that made him drop his weapon. A human figure was standing just outside the light, still and silent. Before the guard could call out, the figure raised an arm, pointed toward the commander's tent, and then turned and walked into the darkness. No one could catch him. By morning, the story had spread through the camp. Some soldiers believed it was a warning. Others thought it was a sign that the humans could reach anywhere, even the heart of their defenses. That same day, a patrol returned with damaged weapons. The energy cells had been removed while the soldiers slept. No one could explain how it was done without waking them. The commander realized the truth: the humans were not just striking at supplies and machines anymore. They were striking at the minds of his soldiers. In the hills, Rion's group met with 2 other bands of humans. They shared food and passed on news. Every group told the same story. The Surath were losing their will to fight. Some even avoided areas where they had been attacked before. Rion understood that the battle was already decided in one way. If the Surath could be made to feel unsafe everywhere, they would have no reason to stay. He reminded the others that the goal was not to destroy the aliens completely, but to make them leave and never return. The commander called for one last plan to capture humans before deciding whether to withdraw. He ordered his soldiers to set traps of their own nets hidden under leaves, false shelters to lure humans inside. But when the plan was put into action, it failed in the worst way. The humans had learned of it before it even began. They turned the traps against the Surath. Nets meant for humans fell on alien patrols. The false shelters collapsed on the soldiers who built them. In the confusion, more supplies vanished from the camp. By the end of the day, the commander sat in his tent staring at the reports. He had lost more resources. His soldiers were shaken, and the humans still moved freely through the land. He thought about the other worlds the Surath had taken. None of them had fought like this. Most had fallen quickly because they tried to meet the Surath in open battle. The humans had done the opposite. They had refused to give the Surath the fight they wanted. Instead, they had used the world itself as their weapon. That night, the commander walked the edge of the camp alone, beyond the lights. The forest was black and still, but he knew they were out there, watching. He could almost feel their eyes on him. For the first time since landing on Earth, he understood that this was not a mission to take land or people. It was a mistake. The humans had turned the land into a trap. The Surath had stepped into it thinking they were the hunters. Now, every shadow was a threat. Every sound in the dark was an enemy. The commander returned to his tent with a single thought in his mind: if they stayed any longer, they might not leave at all. The Surath commander called his officers together before sunrise. The air in the tent was heavy with silence. No one wanted to speak the words that had been growing in their minds for days. The commander finally said them aloud. "We are leaving." There was no cheer, no protest, just the sound of tired breathing. They had landed on this world expecting quick victory. Instead, they had been drained by an enemy they could never truly see. The humans had broken their plans without ever giving them a direct battle. Orders were sent to every camp. Equipment was to be packed. Weapons were to be stored. Landing pads were to be prepared for the ships returning from orbit. In the forest, the humans saw the change almost at once. Patrols began to vanish from the roads. The steady movement of supplies slowed. Large groups of Surath soldiers started carrying crates toward the cleared landing zones. Rion's group watched from a hill as the aliens took down their own watchtowers. "They are leaving," Rion said quietly. The others did not shout or celebrate. They had learned not to believe something until it was done. Still, there was a new feeling in the air, like the first warm wind after a long winter. The Surath worked quickly, but they were not free from trouble even now, at night. They still heard movement in the trees. Sometimes they found marks scratched into the dirt near their camps, the open-eyed, always watching. It was as if the humans wanted to remind them of what had driven them away. The commander felt the pressure of every hour. He knew that the humans could still strike at their ships. Before they left, the soldiers guarded the landing pads day and night, but the fear never left their faces. On the fourth day of preparation, one of the landing pads failed. A key part of its system had been removed during the night. No one had seen the humans. Who did it? The commander had no choice but to send for spare parts from another pad. It delayed the departure and left one camp more exposed. Rion's group met with other bands of humans in the hills. They agreed on one thing: there was no need for a final fight. The Surath were already defeated in their minds. The humans only had to watch and make sure they did not change their plan. The commander moved among his soldiers, saying little. He could see their relief at the thought of leaving. Some spoke in low voices about never returning to this planet. Others refused to speak about the humans at all, as if silence could erase the memory of being hunted in the dark. When the first transport ship arrived, it came down fast, as if afraid of staying too long. Dust and smoke swirled through the air. As the Surath loaded it with equipment, crates of weapons, scanners, and tools disappeared into the ship's hold. But not everything could be taken. Damaged machines and heavy parts were left behind. Some landing pads were abandoned completely. The commander made no effort to hide the loss they had come to take from this world. And now they would leave much of their own behind. In the forests, the humans watched as the ships lifted away, one after another. They moved silently among the trees, making sure no hidden patrols remained. By the seventh day of departure, only one large camp remained. It was the first camp the Surath had built, and now it looked broken and tired. The metal walls were dented. The watchtowers were empty. Inside, soldiers carried the last crates to the pad. Rion stood on a ridge overlooking the camp. He remembered the fear of the first night, the strange lights in the sky, and the sound of alien engines over the hills. Now those same engines would carry the invaders away. At sunset, the last ship came down. The commander was the final one to board. He looked once toward the forest. He could not see anyone there, but he felt the same pressure he had felt since the first day, that someone was watching him, measuring him, and finding him unworthy of this place. When the ship rose into the air, the sound rolled through the valleys. The humans watched until the lights vanished into the clouds. Only then did they step out of the shadows, from the hills, from the rivers, from the ruins of villages. People emerged. They walked to the empty camps, taking what they could use and breaking what they could not. They pulled down the alien walls, cut apart the machines, and cleared the landing pads. The earth began to breathe again. Rion walked through the remains of the first camp. He saw the marks of the struggle everywhere: scorched ground, broken tools, in the empty spaces where alien crates had stood. But he also saw the faces of his people, no longer hiding, no longer waiting. They will not come back, an older man said beside him. Rion nodded. If they do, they will remember this place. They will remember what happened here. The open-eye mark was drawn one last time on the ground outside the ruined camp. It was not for the Sroth this time, it was for the humans, a reminder of what they had done together. The Sroth had come to Earth for slaves. They had left with nothing but regret, and in the forests, in the hills, and across the plains, the humans began the work of rebuilding, knowing the world was theirs because they had never let it be taken.